Journal every morning at 7 Eastern on C-SPAN. The U.S. Senate is gaveling in to vote on Senator Coburn's plan to repeal ethanol tax credit. It's an amendment to an economic development bill. Later, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida is expected to give his maiden speech. And now live to the Senate floor.
Home of Mr. Coburn. Who yields time? No one has yielded time. Time will be charged equally to both sides.
Mr. President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, speaking on this amendment, I oppose this amendment and urge my colleagues to do the same. There is going to be a change with biofuels in this country. We're going to see a phasing out of the support for biofuels in terms of federal policy. But the time to do it is not in the middle of the year after 7 years of federal support with 5 days' notice. Senator Thune and I have an alternative bill that actually takes the rest of the year, the last 6 months of this year, the funding, and puts $1 billion into deficit reduction, and then allows the industry to keep its footing so it can actually compete with oil. I would remind my colleagues that this is now 10% of our fuel supply. There have been studies done that shows the price of gasoline would escalate up to $1 more a gallon if the rug was suddenly pulled out from under this industry, and it is the only competition with oil. So while this industry, unlike the oil industry, has acknowledged that there was change ahead and that they are willing to be part of this change and actually put money on the table, the time to do it is not now on an unrelated bill with no discussion of a comprehensive energy plan for this country. And I know Senator Thune also would like to talk about his opposition to this amendment.
If, Mr. President, I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this motion.
Senator from South Dakota is recognized.
As the senator from Minnesota has pointed out, there's a better way to do this. And I think we can all work together in a constructive way and accomplish what the proponents of this amendment want to do, but do it in a way that doesn't disrupt this industry. In December, 81 senators voted for tax policy. And here we are 6 months later, and we're going to say we're going to pull the rug out. We're going to tell you guys just go pound sand after giving them a commitment back in December that we would have this tax policy in place until the end of the year. That's not the way to do this. This can be done in a right way, and I would urge my colleagues to defeat this motion, and then we will work together to try and get to where we have a solution in place that is good for jobs, good for the energy industry in this country, and good for the taxpayers of America. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Oklahoma.
we have introduced into a record the industry that gets this tax credit. They represent 97% of all the ethanol that's blended. They don't want the $3 billion. They say it's not a disruption to them, and in fact it's $3 billion that we can not afford to pay. It is something that already has accomplished its perfect purpose through a government mandate. I yield the rest of my time to the senator from California, the Senator Feinstein.
Senator from California is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I thank the senator from Oklahoma. I think everybody in this body now knows that I am strongly for this measure. Unfortunately, it has created, I think, a lot of feelings that really don't work to the benefit of this body. It's my understanding that there is an offer from the leader that we will have a vote by Friday next, which means a week from this Friday. I tend to just say what I think. On our side, I think there are real concerns about the process used to bring this amendment to the floor. And I think that has created some, unfortunately, very bad feelings, which even are enough to affect people's votes. My view has been a little different. I've watched this ethanol amendment go from $1.5 billion in the early part of the 2000s to where it costs $5.7 billion now. It's a triple crown. It's a subsidy, it's a mandate, it's a protective tariff. It should go. I have no question about that. I also want to see this body have an ability to work together. It also gives us a little bit of time to see if we could negotiate some agreement between the senator from Minnesota and the senator from South Dakota. Now, that would be the best of all worlds. Whether we can do this or not, I don't know. But I'm certainly willing to try. What I hate to see is this vote get so caught up, which it is now caught up in process, that we've got no chance of sorting it out. I've asked the senator from Oklahoma, would you consider withdrawing this amendment so that we could try and see if we can...
Senator's time has expired.
Just a couple of seconds more. So that we...
Without objection.
May I?
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you very much. So that we could try and see if we could work something out with Senators Klobuchar and Thune. I would implore him once again, I think for the best interests of our body as a whole, both sides, we ought to take the time to try to work it out. I think we lose votes right now on the basis of the process alone that we would not lose on just a straight vote. I believe if it weren't for the process, we would have 60 votes. That's my belief. So I want the senator of Oklahoma to know that right up front, and I would implore him to let us withdraw the amendment, try to negotiate a solution, and then take this up as the leader has pledged by Friday next.
Mr. President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
I ask unanimous consent for 2 minutes.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
The reason this amendment ended up the way it is because we don't have an open amendment process in the Senate anymore. Rule 22 gives every senator the right to offer an amendment. We have no Senate unless we have the right to offer an amendment. There's no usurpation of the power of the majority leader. He gets to set what bills are on the floor. Every senator has the right to file cloture on their amendments. Every senator. They also have every right to offer amendments. And we would not be in this position if we did not have a closed amendment process instead of an open amendment process. I would like to solve this problem. I recognize that this is going to be blue-slipped anyway. I thank the majority leader for his offer. I don't think it accomplishes what we want. I think we end up losing what we can get and what should get. And I think the American people deserve to have us taking this $3 billion now out of the hands of the large oil companies, not to the benefit of any American except to their detriment and their children.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close debate on the pending amendment number 436 to S. 782, signed by 17 senators.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on amendment number 436 as modified, offered by the senator from Oklahoma, Mr. Coburn, to S. 782, the Economic Development Revitalization Act of 2011, shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. Alexander. Aye. Ms. Ayotte. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Beckich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal.
I mean, the bill is presented to the EPW, but you can't instruct the EPW.
Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman.
But you can't instruct a committee to put something else in another committee's jurisdiction back in the bill.
Mrs. Boxer.
Rule 15. It is.
Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin.
There's nothing.
Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey.
I mean, it's not that big of a bill.
Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Dement. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Noway. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Carey. Mr. Kirk.
Well, you can't do anything with these, I don't think.
Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle.
What we're discussing, I think that's...
Ms. Landrieu.
That's something we're discussing.
Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy.
But you've got other people...
Mr. Lee.
You've got Murphy's 440.
Mr. Levin. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain. Mrs. McCaskill. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez.
Energy efficient loans.
Mr. Merkley. Ms. Mikulski.
No, this is the...
Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mrs. Murray.
Cole is no pack.
Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Mr. Paul. Mr. Portman. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Risch. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Rockefeller.
About modifying.
Mr. Rubio. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Sessions. Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Shelby. Ms. Snow. Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Udall of Colorado. Mr. Udall Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Alexander, Ayotte, Barrasso, Bozeman, Burr, Coburn, Collins, Corker, Crapo, Enzi, Graham, Heller, Hutchison, Inhofe, Kyle, Lee, McCain, Pryor, Rubio, Sessions, Shelby, and Vitter. Mr. Cornyn, aye. Mr. Toomey, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Baucus, Beckidge, Bennett, Bingaman, Blumenthal, Brown of Ohio, Coates, Durbin, Grassley, Harkin, Inouye, Johans, Johnson of South Dakota, Klobuchar, Cole, Landrieu, Levin, Merkley, Moran, Murray, Reed of Rhode Island, Reed of Nevada, Rockefeller, Schumer, Shaheen, Stabenow, Thune, Udall of Colorado, Whitehouse, and Wicker. Mr. Isaacson, aye. Mr. Carper, no. Mr. Roberts, no. Mr. Tester, no. Mr. Chambliss, aye. Mr. Cochran. Mr. Cochran, no. Mr. Franken, no. Paul. Mr. Paul, aye. Mrs. McCaskill, no. One votes no. Mr. Blunt, no. Mr. Coons? No. Mrs. Feinstein? Mrs. Feinstein? No. Mr. Warner? No. Mrs. Boxer? No. Mrs. Hagan? No. Mr. Brown in Massachusetts? Aye. Mr. Cardin? No. Mr. Conrad? No. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin? Aye. Mr. McConnell? Aye. Mr. Sanders? No. Mr. Akaka? Mr. Akaka? No. Mr. Manchin? Aye. Mr. Leahy? No. Mr. Hoven? No. Mr. Risch? Mr. Risch? Aye. Mr. Tester? Aye. Mr. Lugar? No. Ms. Murkowski? Aye. Mr. Carey? No. Mr. Menendez? No. Mr. Dement? Aye. Mr. Lautenberg? No. Mr. Webb? Aye. Ms. Snow? Aye. Mr. Udall of New Mexico? No. Ms. Cantwell? Aye. Ms. Mikulski? No. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska? No. Mr. Hatch? Aye. Mr. Lieberman? Aye. Mr. Nelson? Mr. Nelson of Florida? No. Mrs. Gillibrand? No. Mr. Kirk? No. Mr. Portman? No. Mr. Wyden? No.
Okay. Are there any senators wishing to change their vote? If not, on this, the yeas are 40, the nays are 59. 3/5 of the Senate duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative, the motion is not agreed to.
They adjust the volume pretty well.
Mr. President.
The senator from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor of representing the great people of the state of Florida, and I'm here in the Senate. And today I speak for the first time on this floor on their behalf. The Senate is a long ways away from where I come from, both literally and figuratively. I come from a hardworking and humble family, one that was neither wealthy nor connected. And yet I've always considered myself to be a child of privilege, because growing up I was blessed with the two very important things. I was raised by a strong and stable family, and I was blessed to be born here in the United States of America. America began from a very powerful truth, that our rights as individuals do not come from our government, they come from our God. Government's job is to protect those rights, and here this republic has done that better than any government in the history of the world. Now, America's not perfect. It took a bloody civil war to free over 4 million African Americans who lived enslaved. It took another 100 years after that before they achieved full equality under the law. But since their earliest days, America has inspired people from all over the world, inspired them with the hope that one day their own countries would be one like this one. Many others decided they could not wait, and so they came here from everywhere to pursue their dreams and to work to leave their children better off than themselves. And the result was the American miracle. A miracle where a 16-year-old boy from Sweden came here with no English in his vocabulary and $5 in his pocket. But he saved enough money to open up a shoe store, and today that store, Nordstrom, is one of the global, multi-billion-dollar global retail giant. A miracle that led to a young couple with no money and no business experience to open up a toy company out of the garage of their home. Today, that company, Mattel, is one of the world's largest toy manufacturers. A miracle where the French-born son of Iranian parents created a website called Auction Web in the living room of his home. Today, that company, known as eBay, stands as a testament to the familiar phrase, "Only in America." Now, these are just 3 examples of Americans whose extraordinary success began with nothing more than an idea. But it's important to remember that the American dream was never just about how much money you made. It is also about something that typifies my home state of Florida, the desire of every parent to leave their children with a better life. And it is a dream lived by countless people whose stories will never be told. People, Americans that never made $1 million, they never owned a yacht or a plane or a second home, and yet they too lived the American dream, because through their hard work and sacrifice they were able to open doors for their children that had been closed for them. It is the story of the people who clean our offices here in this building, who work hard so that one day their children can go to college. It is the story of the men and women who serve our meals in this building, who work hard so that one day their children can accomplish their own dreams. It is the story of a bartender and a maid in Florida. Today, their son serves here in the Senate and stands as a proud witness of the greatness of this land. Becoming a world power was never America's plan, but that's exactly what the American economic miracle made her. Now, most great powers have used their strength to conquer, but America's different. For us, our power always has come with a sense that to those that much is given, much is expected. A sense that with the blessings that God bestowed upon this land came the responsibility to make the world a better place. And in the 20th century, That is precisely and exactly what America did. America led in 2 world wars so that others could be free. America led in a Cold War to stop the spread of and ultimately defeat communism. While our military and foreign policy contributions helped save the world, it was our economic and cultural innovations that helped transform it. The fruits of the American miracle can be found in the daily lives of people everywhere. Anywhere in the world that someone uses a mobile phone, email, the internet, or GPS, they are enjoying the benefits of the American miracle. Anywhere in the world where a bone marrow, lung, or heart transplant saves a life, they are touched by the value of the American miracle. And on one night in July of 1969, the whole world witnessed the American miracle firsthand. For on that night, an American walked on the surface of the moon, and it was clear to the whole world that these Americans could do anything. Now, clearly, America's rise was not free of adversity. We faced a civil rights struggle that saw governors defy presidents, that saw police dogs attack innocent, peaceful protesters, saw little children murdered in churches by bombs. We faced 2 oil crises. America faced Watergate. America faced American hostages in Iran. I grew up in the 1980s, a time when it was morning in America. And yet even then, we faced a war on drugs. We lost soldiers in Beirut and astronauts on the Challenger. We faced a devastating oil spill in Alaska and a terrifying new disease called AIDS. Through challenges and triumphs, the 20th century was the American century, a century where America's political, economic, and cultural exceptionalism made the world a more prosperous and peaceful place. But now we find ourselves in a new century. And there's this growing sense that for America, things will never be the same. That maybe this century will belong to someone else. Indeed, we do now stand at a turning point in our history, one where there are only 2 ways forward for us. We will either bring on another American century, or we are doomed to witness America's decline. Another American century is fully within our reach, because there is nothing wrong with our people. The American people haven't forgotten how to start a business. The American people haven't run out of good ideas. We Americans are as great as we have ever been. But our government is broken, and it is keeping us from doing what we have done better than any people in the history of the world: create jobs and prosperity. If we here in Washington could just find agreement on a plan to get control of our debt, we could just make our tax code simpler and more predictable. If we could just get the government to ease up on some of these onerous regulations, the American people will take care of the rest. If this government will do its part, this generation of Americans will do theirs. They will give us a prosperous, upwardly mobile economy, one where our children will invent, build, and sell things to a world where more people than ever can afford to buy them. If we give America a government that can live within its means, the American economy will give us a government of considerable means, a government that can afford to pay for the things government should be doing, because it does not waste money on the things government should not be doing. If we can deliver on a few simple but important things, we have the chance to do something that's difficult to imagine is even possible. An America whose future will be greater than her past. But sadly, that's not where we're headed. We have made no progress on the issues of our time because, frankly, we have too many people in both parties who have decided that the next election is more important than the next generation. And our lack of progress on these issues has led to something even more troubling: a growing fear that maybe these problems are too big for us to solve, too big for even America. Well, there is no reason to be afraid. Our story, the story of America, it is not the story of a nation that never faced problems. It is the story of a nation that faced its challenges and solved them. Our story, the story of the American people, is not the story of a people who always got it right. It is the story of a people who, in the end, got it right. we should never forget who we Americans are. Every single one of us is the descendant of a go-getter, of dreamers and of believers, of men and women who took risk and made sacrifices because they wanted their children to live better off than themselves. And so whether they came here on the Mayflower, on a slave ship, or on an airplane from Havana, we are all descendants of the men and women who built here the nation that saved the world. We are still the great American people. And the only thing standing in the way of us solving our problems is our willingness to do so. And whether we do so or not is of great consequence, and not just to us, but to the whole world. I know that now some say that times are so tough here at home that we can no longer afford to worry about what happens abroad, that maybe America needs to mind its own business. Well, whether we like it or not, there is virtually no aspect of our daily lives that is not directly impacted by what happens in the world around us. We can choose to ignore global problems, but global problems will not ignore us. You know, one of my favorite speeches is one that talks about our role in the world. It was the speech that President Kennedy was set to give had he lived just one more day, and it closes with these words. We in this country, in this generation, are by destiny rather than by choice the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and responsibility, that we may exercise our strength with wisdom and restraint, and that we may achieve in our time and for all time the ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. That must always be our goal, and the righteousness of our cause must always underlie our strength. For as was written long ago, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Almost half a century later, America is still the only watchman on the wall of world freedom. And there is still no one to take our place. What will the world look like if America declines? Well, today people all over the world are forced to accept the familiar lie that the price of security is our liberty. If America declines, who will serve as living proof that liberty, security, and prosperity can all exist together? Today, radical Islam abuses and it seeks to impose its will on the whole world. If America declines, who will stand up to them and defeat them? Today, children are used as soldiers and trafficked as slaves. Dissidents are routinely imprisoned without trial. They're subjected to torture and forced into confessions and labor. If America declines, what nation on the earth will take these causes as their own? What will the world look like if America declines? Who's going to create the innovations of the 21st century? Who will stretch the limits of human potential and explore the new frontiers? And if America declines, who will do all these things and ask for nothing in return, motivated solely by the desire to make the world a better place? The answer is no one will. There is still no nation or institution on this planet that is willing or able to do what America has done. Ronald Reagan famously described America as a shining city on a hill. Now some say that we can no longer afford the price we must pay to keep America's light shining. Others like to say that there are new shining cities that will soon replace us. I say they're both wrong. Yes, the price we're going to pay to keep America's light shining is high. But the price we will pay if America's light stops shining is even higher. And yes, there are new nations emerging with prosperity and influence. And that is what we always wanted. America never wanted to be the only shining city on a hill. We wanted our example to inspire the people of the earth to build one of their own. You see these nations, these new emerging nations, these new shining cities? We hope they will join us But they can never replace us, because their light is but a reflection of our own, the light of an American century that now spreads throughout the earth. A world that still needs America. A world that still needs our light. A world that needs a new American century. And I pray, with God's help, that that will be our legacy to our children and to the world. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Thank you.
The Republican leader.
Mr. President, on behalf of all of our colleagues, I want to commend our new senator from Florida for his remarkable speech. No one is a better example of the American dream than he is, and no one expresses American exceptionalism better than Senator Rubio, and I congratulate him on behalf of all of our colleagues for his maiden speech.
Mr. President,
the leader.
I join with my Republican counterpart in congratulating my friend from Florida for his fine speech. But I wish in his remarks he would once in a while mention where he spent a lot of his youth, Las Vegas and North Las Vegas, Nevada. No tabs of quorum.
Mr. President.
Okay.
The senator, the leader, holds his request, and I recognize the senator from Florida.
Mr. President, I want to congratulate my colleague from Florida, and I want him to know that it is a great pleasure for me to serve with him. It has been a tradition in Florida that the two senators get along. This has been a great tradition that goes back when Bob Graham and Connie Mack were the two senators. It continued with Mel Martinez and me, and now I have the privilege of continuing that kind of relationship with Senator Rubio. The maiden speech is a big deal for a senator, and it is always a memory that is forever etched in my mind. I was in one of those desks over there as a very junior member, and I'll never forget, in the course of my speech, and it was mostly an empty chamber, that I mentioned that it was my maiden speech. And in a few minutes, all of a sudden, those side doors flung open, and in strode Senator Robert Byrd. And so here I'm giving my maiden speech, and Senator Byrd is sitting in his seat. And as I finish, he says, "Would the senator yield?" And I said, "Of course I yield to the senior senator from West Virginia." And Senator Byrd, on the top of his head, gives an oration about the history of maiden speeches in the Senate. Now, of course, that is indelibly etched in my memory, and surely the senator's maiden speech today is indelibly etched in his, and I congratulate him. I thank him for his personal friendship. I thank him also for the privilege of the professional relationship that we have.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, very briefly, I've come to know Senator Rubio. We have early morning seminars, and we've come to know one another a little better, and I hope that that continues. But I want to especially thank you for that speech, because it was clearly a speech with a lot of personal reflection on your own life and on the life of America. What you said will endure. There are things in there that we all should remember about this nation and about our responsibility as senators. Thank you for that fine speech, and I'm glad that I was here to be a witness to it.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to a period of morning business.